Marriages don't collapse in courtrooms. They collapse in bedrooms when sacred intimacy is denied. The real battlefield is not where lawyers argue, but where silence grows between husband and wife. Padre Pio once thundered that marriage is not just law, it is a sacrament, and to despise it is to despise the very plan of God. Those words cut deeper than any human warning, because they are not advice, they are prophecy. Every time you refuse your spouse, you're not simply holding back affection, you're tearing the veil of the covenant that heaven itself sealed on your wedding day. And what you may call just a rejection, heaven calls an open door to the enemy. Think about that for a moment. You may believe that saying no tonight is a small matter. You may convince yourself that you're tired, that you need your space, that tomorrow will be better. But the unseen world does not measure in excuses. In the eyes of heaven and in the eyes of hell, that moment of coldness is a crack. And every crack becomes an entry point for shadows to crawl in. Padre Pio warned countless souls that the devil does not storm through the front door, he slips quietly through the fractures we ignore. What begins as one night of rejection can become months of distance, years of silence, and finally a tombstone over what once was alive and sacred. You see, a marriage doesn't die suddenly. It suffocates slowly in the absence of touch, in the lack of kindness, in the withheld embrace. The papers may still be in order, the rings may still shine on your fingers, but without the sacred intimacy, you're holding a shell with no fire inside. Padre Pio spoke often about how grace clings to the sacraments, and marriage is one of them. That means intimacy is not just physical, it is spiritual warfare. When you hold each other, you seal a gate. When you push each other away, you leave it unguarded. So many men and women in their 50s and 60s look back with grief, realizing they let bitterness, fatigue, or pride rob them of what God had entrusted to them. They thought intimacy was optional. They thought denying it was harmless. But the truth is harsh. Every refusal became an agreement with the enemy. Every cold shoulder signed a silent contract with division. And division is the language of hell. Heaven speaks unity, hell speaks separation. Which voice will your marriage echo? Padre Pio would look into the eyes of those who came to him and say things they never forgot. He carried the wounds of Christ in his body, but he also carried the weight of broken families in his prayers. He warned that Satan targets marriages because they mirror Christ and the church. When intimacy fades, that mirror cracks. And once cracked, children suffer, trust evaporates, faith trembles. All from what you once thought was just a rejection. I want you to pause and remember your wedding day. Remember the vows, the joy, the trembling hands, the tears of hope. That was not theater, that was heaven writing a covenant. Every embrace since that day was meant to renew that covenant. Every act of intimacy was meant to declare to angels and demons alike, this union is sealed, this love is guarded, this house is under divine protection. So when you deny it, you are not simply tired, not simply angry, you are interrupting the renewal of the covenant. Can you see how dangerous that is? The truth is, darkness doesn't need much space. It only needs one unlocked door, and every cold refusal is an unlocked door. That's why Padre Pio cried out for husbands and wives to defend their homes with prayer, with faith, and yes, with the sacred act of intimacy. He knew that without it, marriages would become hollow, and hollow marriages collapse under the weight of temptation. Look around. How many families do you know that seemed fine on the outside, but crumbled behind closed doors? How many children carry scars because their parents stopped cherishing each other? How many spouses trade affection for isolation until someone else comes to offer what was neglected at home? Do you think it happens suddenly? No. It begins in the quiet of a bedroom where love was refused. Every time you say no to your spouse, you think you're controlling your own body. But spiritually, you're signaling surrender to another force. You're saying, this covenant doesn't matter tonight. And the devil whispers, if it doesn't matter tonight, maybe it doesn't matter tomorrow. If it doesn't matter tomorrow, maybe it never mattered at all. Can you feel the trap tightening? The Bible says the two shall become one flesh. That is not poetry. That is heaven's decree. Oneness is not symbolic, it is real, it is binding, it is holy. And when you break that oneness through rejection, you are breaking what heaven joined. That's why Padre Pio's words were so fierce. He wasn't warning about romance, he was warning about eternity. This message may feel heavy, but it must be. Because what is at stake is not just comfort, not just feelings, but souls. Families are at stake. Generations are at stake. And yes, your marriage is at stake. That's why I must tell you this without sugar, without excuses, without delay. Denying sacred intimacy is not a small matter. It is the crack in the wall, the leak in the ship, the whisper that grows into a storm. Do not underestimate the power of one embrace. Do not underestimate the destruction of one refusal. Heaven weighs them differently than you do. Padre Pio called marriage a fortress, but he also said that every fortress has gates. Keep them closed to darkness. Guard them with love. Defend them with faith. Protect them with intimacy. Because what you call just a rejection, heaven calls an open door to the enemy, and that door once opened does not close easily. The question is, will you let it stand open another night? Or will you rise tonight and reclaim the covenant before it is too late? Distance becomes suspicion. Suspicion becomes betrayal. Betrayal becomes destruction. That is the progression of every broken covenant. It never starts with an affair. It never begins with a divorce lawyer. It begins when one heart pulls away and the other senses it. When nights become colder, words, shorter glances, sharper. Padre Pio once warned the devil enters through the smallest cracks. He wasn't speaking in metaphor. He was describing the very strategy of hell against marriages. You may think a cold night is harmless, but to the enemy it is the first crack in the wall. A couple once believed their marriage was untouchable. They had the rings, the photos, the legal papers. They thought the vow itself was the protection. But the battlefield was not the certificate in the drawer. The battlefield was the bed they no longer shared. In that bed, silence replaced tenderness. Walls replaced warmth. And in the silence, another voice began to whisper, "You deserve better. You are unloved. You should look elsewhere." That voice was not their own. It was the hiss of a serpent exploiting the distance. The truth is ruthless. Every time intimacy dies, the covenant bleeds. And if left unattended, that blood loss leads to death. One refusal becomes many. Many refusals become months. Months turn into years. And one day the couple wakes up as strangers living under the same roof. The house still stands, but the home is gone. The children still eat at the table, but the love that was meant to be their foundation is dust. Padre Pio said often that the devil hates families because they mirror heaven's unity. Destroy the family, and you wound the image of God in the world. Suspicion grows like a seed in dry ground. A wife wonders why her husband stays late. A husband wonders why his wife avoids his touch. Words are no longer words. They are daggers. Questions are no longer questions. They are accusations. The vows that once promised forever now sound like broken promises. And all of this began with a single cold shoulder, a single night of silence. That is why heaven weighs intimacy differently than we do. To us, it is routine. To heaven, it is covenant. To hell, it is territory to invade. Imagine a fortress on a hill. Its walls are high, its gates strong. But one crack in the foundation, one stone removed, is enough for the enemy to slip in. A marriage without intimacy is that fortress. From the outside, it looks strong, but the enemy already crawls within. And once inside, he doesn't rush to destroy. He whispers. He poisons. He waits. Until one day, betrayal is no longer unthinkable. It is inevitable. A man once told Padre Pio that his marriage had ended without reason. His wife simply drifted away. Padre Pio looked at him and said, "The enemy was given space." That sentence haunted him, because he realized the space wasn't an affair, wasn't a fight. It was the distance he had allowed to grow in silence. He had neglected the altar of intimacy, and in doing so, he had neglected the presence of God in his home. Suspicion then turns to betrayal, and betrayal is the grave of trust. One look at another man, one message on another woman's phone, and suddenly what was sacred is shattered. The husband feels justified, she rejected me. The wife feels justified, he ignored me. But both are deceived. Neither rejection nor neglect can justify betrayal. Yet this is exactly how the enemy works. He uses your wounds to tempt you into wounding back. He makes you believe you're defending yourself, when in reality, you're handing him the keys to your home, and betrayal leads to destruction. Divorce papers are signed, families split, children carry scars into adulthood. Generations repeat the same pain. What began as a small crack ends as a demolished house. Padre Pio wept over such tragedies because he knew they were preventable. The devil had not overpowered them with force. He had seduced them with whispers. He had walked in through doors left open by coldness and pride. I want you to see it clearly. The distance you feel tonight is not harmless. It is not just fatigue, not just mood, not just stress. It is an arrow aimed at your covenant. If you do not fight it, it will grow. If you do not seal the crack, it will widen. Distance always becomes suspicion. Suspicion always becomes betrayal. Betrayal always becomes destruction. This is the chain, and the only way to break it is to close the door before it opens wider. Padre Pio said that when couples neglect each other, they are not just hurting themselves, they are inviting darkness into their homes. That darkness does not remain silent. It feeds on arguments, it fuels bitterness, it plants lies. Lies like you are unloved, you are forgotten, you should leave. But they are lies. The truth is, you are still bound by a covenant that heaven sees as holy. The truth is, the fire can be rekindled if you choose. But if you refuse, the enemy will not hesitate to consume what remains. Look at the homes around you. How many empty shells stand where love once flourished? How many broken families fill the pews on Sunday, singing hymns with lips but bleeding in silence inside? How many children have grown up doubting love because the love between their parents was never healed? Do you think this is coincidence? No. It is strategy. Padre Pio saw it clearly and warned, the devil enters through the smallest cracks. So I ask you tonight, if the sacred fire goes out, what remains? Is it still a marriage or just paperwork? Is it still a home or just four cold walls? You can have the house, the money, the reputation, but without intimacy, without covenant love, you are living in ruins, disguised as order. And the enemy laughs because he knows you surrendered not in war, but in silence. The question is, will you let the fire die, or will you fight to guard it, to rekindle it, to protect it with every breath? Because the destiny of your marriage depends on it. The destiny of your children depends on it. The destiny of your soul may depend on it. If the sacred fire goes out, what remains a house or just four cold walls? The Bible declares, "The two shall become one flesh." Those words are not poetry. They are not romantic imagery for wedding ceremonies. They are decree etched in eternity, spoken by the Creator, binding on earth as it is in heaven. This decree is not negotiable. It is not cultural. It is sacred law. And when you said "I do," you were not signing a contract. You were stepping into that divine decree. Padre Pio understood this with burning clarity. To him, intimacy between husband and wife was more than affection. It was prayer in flesh, a living altar, where God's grace descended into the ordinary rhythms of life. When a husband and wife embrace, they are not simply expressing desire. They are renewing covenant, sealing their house with divine protection, proclaiming with their bodies what their souls promised before God. The marriage bed, he often said, was not a place of shame, but a sanctuary as holy as a chapel, as binding as the altar. But here's the truth, spike you cannot ignore. Refusing intimacy is not just saying no to your spouse. It is saying no to God's covenant. Every time you push away, every time you turn cold, you are not only rejecting flesh, you are rejecting the decree that heaven has spoken over your union. You think you are controlling your mood, preserving your comfort. But in reality, you are ripping through a bond that was meant to mirror Christ and His church. And heaven does not remain silent when its decrees are despised. Think of Christ on the cross. He did not hold back His body. He gave all of it. He poured Himself out to become one with His bride, the church. That is the pattern. That is the model. And when a husband or wife withholds their body, they are distorting the reflection of Christ's sacrifice. They are saying with their actions the covenant can be paused. The oneness can be broken. But God's covenant is not casual. It is sacred. It is eternal. It is meant to be guarded with the same fierceness with which Christ guards His bride. Padre Pio carried the wounds of Christ in his own flesh, and he knew the weight of what it meant to embody covenant. He would tell couples that their intimacy was a shield, not a game. It was a declaration to every demon that their house was sealed by God. And yet how many couples treat it lightly? How many shrug and say, "It doesn't matter tonight." That shrug is the sound of a covenant cracking. That shrug is an invitation to darkness. The truth is, the bed is not neutral ground. It is an altar. Every time you unite, you are offering your covenant as worship. Every time you deny, you are withholding worship. Do you see how heavy this is? Do you see why Padre Pio trembled when he spoke of marriage? He knew the unseen war being fought over every bed, every embrace, every whispered yes, and every cold no. Picture the angels watching as husband and wife embrace. To them it is not lust. It is not mere flesh. It is covenant being renewed, love being declared, unity being sealed. Then picture heaven watching as one spouse turns away, as the other lies wounded, as silence replaces tenderness. To you, it feels like an argument, a tired night. To heaven, it echoes like betrayal. Because silence in that place is not absence, it is rupture. It is the sound of a vow being denied. How many couples will stand before God one day and realize that their rejection of each other was not just a personal matter, that it was a spiritual rebellion, that their coldness was not a small choice, but a fracture in heaven's decree? Padre Pio saw it clearly: to despise intimacy is to despise God's plan. And despising God's plan always carries consequences. This is why Scripture is relentless in reminding us that marriage is not a symbol. It is real. It is flesh and spirit joined. The two shall become one flesh is not a suggestion. It is the reality that defines you from the moment you enter the covenant. Which means every act of love is a renewal, every embrace a proclamation, every refusal a violation. You may try to justify it. You may say, "I was tired, I was hurt, I was busy." And those excuses may soothe your conscience for a night. But in the courts of heaven, excuses do not erase decrees. Heaven does not bend to moods. Heaven only honors covenant. And when covenant is dishonored, heaven grieves. Padre Pio often said that angels weep over the wounds inflicted by spouses upon each other, because those wounds echo beyond the home into eternity. If intimacy is prayer and flesh, then neglect is silence in prayer, and silence in prayer is deadly. Imagine refusing to pray for months, for years. Your faith would wither, your heart would grow cold, your spirit would falter. In the same way, when intimacy is withheld, the covenant starves. The fire goes out, the altar grows cold, and a cold altar is a vulnerable altar, exposed to every enemy, open to every attack. Do you understand now why this matters? Do you see why Padre Pio's words strike like lightning across the centuries? He was not talking about feelings. He was not talking about culture. He was talking about war. And the front lines of that war are not in distant nations. They are in your own bedroom. Let this sink in every time you choose silence over intimacy. You are siding with separation over unity, coldness over covenant, pride over love. And heaven does not remain neutral. Heaven hears it, and so does hell. Which side will your choices empower? Which voice will your actions echo? You think silence in bed is harmless. But in heaven, it echoes like betrayal. And betrayal, once allowed to grow, becomes a chain no human strength can break. Only repentance, only humility, only renewed covenant can shatter it. The question is, will you hear this warning before it is too late? Or will you wait until silence becomes suspicion, suspicion becomes betrayal, betrayal becomes destruction? The altar is waiting. The covenant still speaks. The decree still stands. The two shall become one flesh. Will you honor it, or will you despise it because eternity is listening and heaven is watching? It didn't happen all at once. That's what makes it so dangerous. The slow drift is always disguised as something harmless. A wife once thought her distance was temporary, just a season of exhaustion. She told herself, "He'll understand. He knows I'm tired." Night after night, she pulled away. She believed she was protecting herself, but what she was really doing was starving the very covenant that held her family together. And across the bed, her husband lay awake, staring into the dark, wondering what he had done wrong. The silence grew louder than any fight. Padre Pio once said, "Satan ruins marriages not with storms, but with small drops of neglect." That sentence is a prophecy every couple needs to hear. Because storms are easy to see. You prepare for them, you resist them, But neglect is invisible, it's subtle, it feels justified. A slammed door makes you feel guilty. A rejection whispered under the excuse of not tonight feels acceptable. And yet those are the very drops that erode the stone. The husband began to question himself. He worked harder thinking maybe if he provided more, she would come back to him. But provision is not a substitute for intimacy. Money cannot buy what only covenant can give. And so as the months passed, the distance grew. The bed that was once a sanctuary now felt like a battlefield where no words were spoken, only wounds inflicted. One night he left for work earlier than usual. She didn't ask why. He stayed later than he needed. She didn't wonder where he was. And in that silence, suspicion crept in. The enemy whispered to both of them, "You are unloved. You are forgotten. You deserve better." Lies disguised as truth, poison disguised as comfort. By the time betrayal entered, it didn't feel like betrayal, it felt like escape. But what it really was destruction. This is the story of countless marriages hidden behind smiles at church, hidden behind family photos. And the tragedy is not that they fought, but that they stopped fighting for each other. They surrendered the battlefield of intimacy. They thought love could survive without it. But Padre Pio warned that grace flows through the sacraments and marriage is one. Intimacy was their altar. When they abandoned it, they abandoned their shield. Do you think their children didn't notice? They noticed the cold stares, the separate rooms, the absence of laughter. Children learn about love not from sermons, but from the way their parents hold each other. And when holding stops, faith in love collapses. A son grows up thinking marriage is a prison. A daughter grows up thinking rejection is normal. And thus the enemy doesn't just wound one generation, he chains the next. That is why Padre Pio's words pierce so deep. He saw the unseen war. He saw how Satan didn't need to attack with rage when neglect worked just as well. He saw that every withheld embrace was another brick removed from the wall. And once the wall crumbles, it is almost impossible to rebuild without divine intervention. But here is the awakening. The wife who thought her coldness was harmless finally looked at her husband one day and saw a stranger. The man who once held her with passion now carried himself with defeat. The joy in his eyes was gone, and in that moment, her heart broke. She realized that the silence she had chosen had spoken louder than any words. She realized that every not tonight had become a not ever. That was her awakening. The husband, too, faced his reckoning. He realized that retreating into work, into distraction, into resentment, had not protected him. It had poisoned him. He realized that seeking comfort outside the covenant was not freedom, it was a snare. That was his awakening. Together they faced the ruins of what was once holy, and for the first time in years, they wept together. Do you see, this is not just about passion. It is about covenant. When they finally knelt and prayed, the Holy Spirit brought them back to the altar they had abandoned. They saw the truth. Intimacy was never just physical. It was the renewal of the vow, the sealing of the union, the protection of their house. And without it, they had left themselves exposed to every attack. Their story is not unique. It is the story of millions. But it does not have to be the ending. It can be the awakening. If you feel distance in your marriage, if you feel silence louder than laughter, you must not ignore it. Because ignoring it is agreeing with destruction. Tonight may be the last chance to heal before suspicion becomes betrayal, before betrayal becomes destruction. What if tonight you chose differently? What if tonight you broke the silence? What if tonight you whispered not rejection, but renewal? Imagine the power of that choice. Imagine how heaven would respond to one embrace, one prayer, one covenant restored. Padre Pio believed in miracles, but he also believed in obedience. He knew that miracles follow obedience to God's design. And God's design is simple: the two shall become one flesh. You cannot afford to shrug this off. You cannot afford to delay. Because the longer you wait, the deeper the cracks grow. And the enemy does not sleep. He is waiting for you to do nothing, because nothing is all he needs. But heaven waits for you to act. Heaven waits for you to stand, to love, to fight. If tonight were your last chance to heal, what would you do? Would you let pride win? Would you let fatigue write the final chapter? Or would you rise, cross the distance, and reclaim the covenant before it is too late? That question will not leave you. It will follow you until you answer. Because silence has already spoken too long. It is time for a new word, a word of love, a word of covenant, a word that tells both heaven and hell where you stand. So let the awakening begin now. Let it begin not with excuses, but with courage. Let it begin with one embrace that shuts the door to the enemy. Let it begin with one prayer that reopens the altar. Because if you wait until tomorrow, tomorrow may never come. And if you allow the sacred fire to die, you will wake to find only ashes where love once burned. If tonight were the last chance to heal, what would you do? This is not about romance. This is about war. The battlefield is not overseas. It is not on some distant front. It is inside your home. The enemy does not need bullets when he has silence. He does not need bombs when he has coldness. He knows that if he can drive a wedge between husband and wife, he has already conquered the children, the legacy, the faith that should have passed from one generation to the next. Padre Pio warned that Satan does not storm the gates. He waits for you to open them by neglect. Every time you turn away from your spouse, you are not simply tired. You are unlocking the door to destruction. You may not realize it, but every embrace you share is an act of warfare. Every time you reach across the distance, you are building a wall against the darkness. Love expressed in flesh is not weakness, it is strategy. It is heaven's design to keep hell at bay. The enemy trembles when a husband and wife choose each other, because that choice echoes Christ and his church, a bond unbreakable, a love unstoppable. When you deny each other, you weaken the fortress. When you honor each other, you turn your house into a fortress that no demon can enter. Tonight, you must make a declaration. Not tomorrow, not someday, now. Speak it out loud, because silence has already done too much damage. Say it with me: I close every door to darkness. I honor the sacred union. Don't just whisper it in your heart. Put it into the air where both heaven and hell can hear. Every declaration is a sword. Every word of covenant is a shield. You may not see the battle, but it is raging and your voice matters. There are homes where laughter has gone silent, where children tiptoe because the atmosphere is heavy. Those homes can be healed, but only if someone declares war on the darkness and chooses light. That someone is you. Stop waiting for your spouse to move first. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. Stop waiting for feelings to change. Action changes atmosphere. Declarations shift reality. Padre Pio believed that prayer spoken in faith carried the weight of heaven. And when your declarations align with God's covenant, angels move. Say it again: I close every door to darkness. I honor the sacred union. Feel the weight of those words. They are not sentences, they are weapons. They are seals placed on the cracks where the enemy has tried to enter. They are fire on the altar that the enemy cannot extinguish. If you declare it every day, your house becomes unshakable. Picture your marriage as a house on a hill. The winds rage, the storms pound, but the fire inside still burns. Why? Because every day you spoke life. Every day you honored covenant. Every day you shut the door on the whispers of the enemy. That is not romance. That is war. And war is won not in one battle, but in daily choices. Every hug, every prayer, every word of affirmation is another arrow shot against the darkness. Maybe you are listening now and thinking, but the distance is already too great. The fire is already gone. That is another lie. The enemy wants you to believe it is too late, but God is the God of resurrection. Padre Pio saw miracles when people thought hope was buried. But miracles do not come to the passive. They come to those who act, those who pray, those who declare. Tonight you can plant the seed of resurrection. Tonight you can light the fire again with one declaration, one embrace, one act of obedience. Do not underestimate the power of your words. The Bible says life and death are in the power of the tongue. So speak life. Say, my marriage is sacred. My home is covered in the blood of Christ. No weapon formed against us will prosper. Every whisper of the enemy is silenced. Speak it until the walls hear it. Speak it until your children hear it. Speak it until your spouse hears it. And even if they do not respond right away, heaven is already moving because you dared to declare. This is how you fight. Not with anger, not with blame, with prayer in flesh and words of fire. Padre Pio carried rosary beads that were worn from use because he understood that repetition was not vain, it was war. Every bead, every prayer, every whispered Hail Mary was another strike against the enemy. In the same way, your daily declarations over your marriage are strikes against the spirit of division. You may not see the results immediately, but the enemy feels every blow. Do not let shame keep you silent. Do not let pride keep you cold. Humble yourself and speak. Declare, I honor the sacred union. Say it even if you feel nothing. Say it even if the silence has been long. Faith is not feeling. Faith is obedience. And obedience opens the floodgates of heaven. The truth is, the most powerful battles are not fought in stadiums, but in bedrooms. Not fought with armies, but with whispered prayers. The enemy fears a couple that prays together, embraces each other, declares life over their house. Because that couple is untouchable. That couple is a fortress. That couple becomes a light so bright that even the next generation walks in its glow. So choose now. Choose war. Choose to fight not against each other, but for each other. Say with authority, I close every door to darkness. I honor the sacred union. Say it until your heart believes it. Say it until the atmosphere shifts. Say it until the enemy flees. Because he cannot stay where covenant is honored, where intimacy is alive, where declarations are made daily. Do you hear it? The silence that once echoed like death can now echo with life. The same bed that was cold can become an altar again. The same house that felt divided can ring with laughter again. But only if you declare it. Only if you fight. Only if you stand where Padre Pio stood and believe that every act of intimacy, every word of faith, every declaration spoken is not weakness, it is victory. But remember this, the enemy will not stop. He will test the cracks again. He will whisper again. And that is why you must keep declaring, keep embracing, keep fighting. Because war does not end with one victory. War is won by refusing to surrender. Will you surrender tonight? Or will you rise? Will you keep the door open? Or will you slam it shut with the force of your declaration? This is the moment. Do not wait. Do not delay. Declare it now. I close every door to darkness. I honor the sacred union. Heaven is listening. Hell is trembling. And your marriage is waiting for you to decide whose side you will stand on. This is the moment everything has been building toward. You have seen the cracks. You have felt the weight of silence. You have heard the whispers of the enemy. Now comes the choice that will define the destiny of your marriage, your family, your house. Padre Pio carried wounds in his own flesh, and yet his greatest grief was for homes torn apart by division. He knew that every broken marriage was not just a personal tragedy, it was a spiritual casualty in the war between heaven and hell. That is why this cannot end as a story, it must end as a battle cry. Listen closely. Heaven is not indifferent to what happens inside your home. The angels take note of every embrace, every declaration, every act of love. Hell takes note of every rejection, every cold shoulder, every silence. You are never neutral. Every choice is a seed, and every seed bears fruit. The question is, will you sow unity or division? Will your house echo with covenant or with betrayal? Now lift your voice. Do not sit passively. Say it with me. Lord, seal our marriages with your blood. Restore what the enemy has tried to steal. Do not whisper it, declare it. Because when you declare it, the ground under your feet shifts. Darkness retreats. Light floods in. Padre Pio believed in the unstoppable power of prayer spoken from the heart. He saw chains break, bodies healed, and families restored because someone dared to call on heaven. Tonight, that someone must be you. I want you to do something bold right now. In the comments, write the name of your family. Write the name of your spouse. Do not be ashamed. This is not exposure, this is warfare. When you write their name, you are saying to heaven and to hell, this family belongs to God. This covenant is sacred. This union will not be broken. And when thousands of names appear, a wave of prayer will rise. A community of faith will cover what the enemy tried to destroy. Share this message with your spouse, even if it feels awkward. Share it with your children so they see what covenant looks like. Share it with your friends because someone you know is silently bleeding. Do not keep this word locked inside. A light hidden is a light wasted. Padre Pio always said that the grace you receive is never meant to be kept. It is meant to be poured out. So pour it out by sharing. Save this declaration and return to it. Let it become part of your nightly prayer. Play it when the silence feels heavy, when the distance feels unbearable, when the enemy whispers, "It's over." Let it remind you that the battle is not over until God says it is over. And God's decree still stands, the two shall become one flesh. Truth must cut through the noise right now. Every saved marriage becomes a fortress against hell. Every family that chooses unity becomes a threat to the enemy's kingdom. Every husband who chooses love, every wife who chooses tenderness, every couple that chooses intimacy together, they are raising a standard of victory that darkness cannot overcome. This is bigger than your feelings. This is bigger than your pride. This is eternity shaping itself inside your house. Now picture this: thousands of couples across the world declaring at the same time, I close every door to darkness. I honor the sacred union. Can you hear it? That is not just a phrase, it is a roar. It is the sound of heaven's army marching into homes that were once cold and filling them with fire again. It is the sound of chains breaking, of lies being silenced, of generations being healed. That sound can begin with you tonight. Padre Pio once told a penitent, "Prayer is the oxygen of the soul. Let intimacy be the oxygen of your marriage. Without it, you suffocate. With it, you breathe life into every corner of your house. Tonight is your chance to breathe again. Tonight is your chance to relight the fire, not with words alone, but with action, with tenderness, with courage. Do not underestimate what one decision can do. One decision to forgive, one decision to embrace, one decision to pray together. That is all it takes to shift the entire atmosphere of your home. The devil hopes you will delay, that you will promise tomorrow. But heaven calls you to act now. Because tomorrow is not promised, but this moment is. So I ask you plainly, which door will stay open in your home? Will it be the door to bitterness, to silence, to pride? Or will it be the door to unity, to covenant, to grace? You cannot keep both open. One must close, one must remain. The choice is in your hands. Now rise, speak it with authority. Declare, my marriage is sealed by God. My family is covered in the blood of Christ. No darkness has a claim here. This house belongs to heaven. Say it again until your spirit shakes. Say it until the atmosphere shifts. Say it until the enemy flees. Because the word of God in your mouth is a weapon sharper than any sword. This is your climax. This is your turning point. Do not let it slip by like another sermon, another video, another forgotten word. Let it be the night you drew a line in the sand. The night you chose covenant over silence. The night you slammed the door on the enemy and declared with heaven, this union is sacred and it will not be broken. And when you finish declaring, don't sit in silence. Act. Cross the distance. Hold your spouse. Pray together. Let the altar of intimacy burn again, because words are powerful, but action seals them. Do not leave this moment without sealing it with love. Now the choice is in your hands. Protect your sacred union or watch the enemy tear it apart. Heaven is waiting for your answer. Hell is watching for your weakness. But you are stronger than silence. You are called for covenant. You are chosen for victory. Speak it, act on it, and never let go.